va commencer.
We will start.
Donc, on va commencer. On va simplement commencer par dire que
We'll just
ce
say
congrès
that
était remarquable. On
this was
était
a
très, très contents
great
d'être
congress.
ici à Québec.
We are very
Grâce à
happy
nos
for
amis de
being
PEN
here.
Québec
Thanks
qui ont travaillé jour et
to our
nuit,
friends Québec
et Bill Martel et
who
toute son
worked
équipe.
hard, Emile Bartel and his
Et je
team.
voudrais dire que
I would like to
c'était
say
quand même un
that
congrès qui a eu 84
there were
centres de 73
84
pays.
centers from
C'est
73
sinon le plus grand
countries.
depuis quelques années,
This
une des
is
plus grands.
one of the largest
C'est
congress
un effort énorme
of the
parce que
last
c'est
year.
pas
It's a
des...
great effort because
Nous
it
sommes
is,
comme le gouvernement des écrivains.
we are like the government of writers,
Je dis toujours un
I will say,
État-nation virtuel
a virtual
des
nation
mots.
state.
Mais on n'a pas des moyens des gouvernements. Et donc, faire venir
government's
84
resources and
centres, les
means,
centaines d'écrivains,
welcoming
c'est
some
extrêmement
hundreds of writers,
compliqué.
it is very
D'ailleurs, il y a des
complicated,
écrivains partout
and
au
there are
Québec,
writers
Canada, qui
everywhere,
ont eux-mêmes
Canada, Quebec, themselves.
contribué pour
They
s'assurer qu'on aurait, je
contributed
crois,
to ensure
36
that
de
we
nos
have
centres qui avaient
36
besoin
of our centers
d'aide
because,
parce
I
qu'ils
mean,
viennent des pays où il
they
y a un
come
argent qui n'est pas
from countries
exportable
where
pour une raison ou une autre.
they could
Donc, c'était vraiment
not
une amitié entre les
pay
écrivains
the fee. So that was
de
a
partout.
true friendship among
Et je dois
writers
dire que
from everywhere.
51 des participants
51 of the participants were
des femmes,
women,
y compris la prochaine présidente.
including the next president.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. On a fait énormément de choses parce qu'il faudrait
We did a
comprendre
lot
qu'un
of
des
things.
boulots
You have to
d'assemblée,
understand
c'est
that
comme l'Assemblée
at
générale,
a general
Parlement,
assembly,
c'est de
like a
décider sur la
parliament, the
politique
job is
pour l'année
to
de PEN.
decide on the
Et
politics
aujourd'hui,
of
on a
PEN
passé
for a year. And
combien de
this,
résolutions,
how many
Marianne,
resolutions
à peu
did
près?
we have?
Marianne, combien de
how many
résolutions
resolutions?
à peu près 28 résolutions.
28 resolutions.
Et on peut donner aux
And
journalistes
we can
des résolutions, on peut
give
dire sur quel
journalists
sujet. Parce
resolutions
vous
we
dire,
can
mais qu'est-ce qui
say
arrive
on
avec ces
which
résolutions? Mais je
resolutions
peux
we
vous
work
dire
on.
que
People
quand on
might
parle de
ask
la situation
us
en
what happened with
Éthiopie,
these resolutions. When
c'est
we
en
talk
grande
about
partie
resolutions
pour
in
les
Ethiopia,
membres, les
it's
journalistes
in
qui
great
sont
part for
en
journalists
Éthiopie
and
et
writers in
dans le Horn of
Ethiopia
Africa.
and in the Horn
Et
of
quand on
Africa.
parle de la
And when we're
situation
talking
au
about the
Vietnam,
situation in Vietnam,
chacune de ces
each
résolutions
of these
joue un rôle
resolutions
régional,
has a
quelquefois
regional
national,
impact
quelquefois
role, sometimes national and
Ça dépend
sometimes
des
international.
résolutions.
It depends on the
Mais
resolutions.
donc, on fait ça,
So
c'est des
this is what
mécaniques
we are
de
doing.
travail,
These are
parce qu'avec ces
working
résolutions,
tools with
les
these
gens peuvent
resolutions.
dire que
People
j'ai
can say,
derrière moi
well,
les 30 000
I have the
écrivains
support
de
of the
150 centres partout dans le
30,000
monde. Et
writers
dans
of
certains pays,
150
c'est la différence
centers
entre
in the world. So
un
that's the
procès, pas de
difference
procès,
between having a trial
être
and
arrêté,
not,
ne
in
pas
some
être
countries
arrêté,
being
c'est une
arrested
grande
and not.
protection
So
de
it
ce
is
travail.
kind of a protection.
Une des choses que nous avons fait, c'est
What
que
we did
chaque
also
année,
is that
dans le
every
pays où
year
nous sommes
in the
invités,
country where
on fait une
hosting
analyse
the
de la
Congress,
situation
we
de
analyze
liberté d'expression dans ce pays.
freedom
Et
of
cette
expression
année, nous
situation.
avons
And
fait,
this year,
évidemment, cette
of
analyse,
course,
vous êtes déjà au courant
you
de la
are probably
situation
aware,
au Canada.
we analyze
Et
the
il y a
situation in
déjà eu
Canada.
beaucoup de commentaires. Il y a
Already,
des gens,
many comments were
et
received,
je dis
and
ça
there
parce
are
que c'est un peu une
people.
plaisanterie. Il y a certains gens qui ont dit, est-ce que
people
c'était
said,
l'intervention dans la campagne électorale
are you
canadienne?
interfering in the
réponse est très
Canadian
simple. Nous tenons
electoral
notre assemblée
campaign? Well,
toujours à la
it's
même
simple.
époque.
We always have our assembly
Et
at the same
cette
time of the year.
analyse est
And
faite
the
pour nos membres.
analysis is done
Et
for
on le
our
donne à la
members,
public
and
parce
we
qu'on
do
est
it, give it to
transparent.
the
C'est fait
public.
pour
We're
nos
transparent,
membres.
but
Donc,
it's for our
quelqu'un a même
members.
dit dans un
So
journal,
someone
pourquoi
said
vous
in a
ne pouvez pas
newspaper,
garder
why
secret
did
jusqu'à
you
après
keep it
l'élection?
secret
Je suis
until
désolé,
after
on
the
est une
election? I'm
organisation de liberté
sorry.
d'expression et de transparence.
You're
Donc,
limiting
on est là,
transparency and freedom
on l'a
of
donné,
speech. So
et
we're
c'est
here.
là, et
It
ça
was
fait partie
published,
d'un
and that's
débat,
part of a
très
debate, a
important
very
qui-
important debate.
que si ça tombe dans l'élection,
If it
comme
happens
ça.
during the election,
C'est
well,
pas
that's the way it is.
mais comme vous avez vu,
As you
il y a une
saw,
grande inquiétude de la
there's a
part
major
de PEN
concern
International
from PEN International
sur l'évolution de la
on
liberté
the
d'expression au Canada. C'est pas à
trend
dire que
in
c'est le
freedom
pire des
of
pays au
speech
monde, c'est à
in
dire qu'un pays qui était
Canada.
parmi
It's
les
not the
meilleurs
worst. It was
et
one of
donc
the
part
best
dans
in
une
Canada.
direction
Now
extrêmement
we are
inquiétante
going
et
in a
il faut pas
very
que ça continue.
concerning direction.
La deuxième chose
So
que
it
je vais
doesn't
dire,
have to. I hope it will not continue. And last thing I will
c'est que nous avons passé
one last thing, we
un
spent,
document de base du point de vue
we
intellectuel
adopted a
et
basic
éthique de
document
PEN, parce qu'on a
for the
notre,
ethics and basic
charte.
document for
Mais,
PEN.
ce qui explique notre charte,
What
c'est une série
explains
de
this
documents comme
charter
le
is
manifeste de Gérone sur les droits
a
linguistiques,
manifesto
un autre
of
document sur les
Jones
droits
on rights of
copyright,
another one on
droits
copyrights,
d'auteur. Il y a sur le Internet,
another
il y a
one
toute
on
une série
Internet.
de
So there's
documents.
a
Et
series of
ici,
documents.
on a mis en place un document absolument essentiel
We
qui s'appelle
adopted
la
a key
Déclaration de
document,
Québec.
which is the
Alors,
Declaration of Quebec.
je vais passer la parole
So I will
au
give the
président de
floor
PEN
to
Québec.
the
En
president
le
of PEN
remerciant
Quebec,
pour tout ce qu'ils ont
thanking
fait. Il
him
va peut-être
for
nous parler
everything he
quelques
did,
minutes de
and
cette
maybe
déclaration.
he can say a few words
Il
about
nous
the
paraissait en effet
declaration.
très
I think it
important
was very important.
certains principes qui
Some
existent dans le cadre du
principles
PEN et qui ont
exist
amené,
in
comme
PEN.
John vient de le mentionner,
And as John said,
au manifeste de Gérone,
it led to the manifesto of Jerome, just to continue on our thought on the importance of writers. And among the literary professions, translation is crucial. Without translation, we would not know anything about others, and others would not know anything about us, about our literature. So we've been preparing that for 2 years, and by creating or writing this declaration on Declaration of Quebec, we wanted to define translation as being an important element in freedom, and translators as full-fledged creators. We discussed many versions. Many writers of this declaration are from Quebec, from Concordia, or here. We are very happy. This declaration will stay as the Declaration of Quebec, and we will not need to use the whole title. That's a success for the Congress.
Juste ajouter deux,
Just
trois
to
points
add
très rapides. On était très
brief
fiers de
point.
cette installation
We
sur le place
were
Louisville des,
very
des
happy
monuments
of
sur
the
trois
for
de
this
nos
facility.
cas, une qui est mort et deux qui sont en danger. Et Raif Badawi,
Raif
évidemment,
Badawi
d'importance
was
particulière. Et on
key,
était très, très contents que
and
sa
we were
femme
really
est venue
happy that
devant le
his
monument
wife
et
came
de
in front of the
parler
monument
devant
to
l'Assemblée.
speak also in front of the assembly
Je voudrais
of the
aussi
assembly
dire
here.
que notre
I'd like to
prix,
say
les
that
Nouvelles Voix,
our
qui est un prix pour les jeunes,
award for the youth,
qui
Nouvelles
ont
Voix,
pas
New
publié,
Voices,
et on le fait chaque année avec
each year we
chacun de nos centres
do it
fait
with
des-
each of the
des
center.
jurys,
We
et puis à
have
partir de là,
a table of
les
jury,
gagnants dans
and
chaque
the winners
pays
in
viennent dans la
each
compétition
country come
internationale
in
avec
the
une jury
international
d'importance
competition with
internationale.
an international
Et, cette fois-ci,
day. And this
c'est Yann
year,
Martel
Yann
qui
Martel
est venu présenter, qui était sur le
presented.
jury,
He was
qui est
member
venu
of the
présenter
jury,
le prix.
and
Et
he
dans
presented the award.
les trois
Now,
finalistes,
in
il y avait
the three finalists,
Léa
there was
Sauer
Léa Sauer
de
from
Penn,
Penn, Germany,
et Sophie Prévost
Sophie
de Penn
Prévost
Québec,
from Penn,
et
Quebec,
Rebecca
and
John
Rebecca
de
John
Penn Gaulois, et
of
c'est Rebecca John qui a gagné. Mais tous les trois étaient
Penn
là,
Wells, and all three were
et
there, were
on était
present.
célébrés.
They were
On a lancé
celebrated,
ici
and we
quelque chose
launched
d'extrêmement
here
important.
something also which is
C'est
important.
un système de
It
soutien
is
pour
a
Penn,
support system
ce qui
for
s'appelle
Penn,
le cercle
which
des
is called the
écrivains.
Circle
Il y a
of
déjà
Writers.
21
There are
membres,
already 21
parmi les
members
écrivains les plus
among
importants
the most
au monde,
important and world-famous
Salman
writers
Rushdie,
like Salman Rushdie,
comme Geert Max, comme Yann Martel, comme
Yann
Sophie
Martel,
Oxen, comme
Sophie
Margaret
Oxen,
Atwood,
Margaret
Yoa
Atwood,
Sada,
Yoa Sada,
Karl Uwe
Karl
Knausgaard.
Uwe
Et c'est un
Knausgaard.
groupe
So
qui va
it's a
être
group
beaucoup
that
plus grand,
will
mais c'est
be
donc un soutien
even larger, but they
financièrement et
support
autrement,
us
et c'est une
financially and
initiative,
in
très
many
importante.
ways.
On a
So it's a
créé
very important
deux
initiative. We
centres
created
nouvelles.
2 new centers.
Mauritanie, son
Mauritania,
président,
the
Djibril Ly,
President Djibril Ly, we're concerned because he has been hospitalized. He fell sick, so but a very difficult place, this country. And Mali, with the President Ismail Traoré, is here. It's really a development in Penn International to have more and more centers in French Africa. We already have English centers in Africa.
Alors, je finis avec
I will close by saying
ça,
that
c'est quelque chose de nouveau.
what you see on the
On a des
screen, this is new.
résolutions,
We
et ça,
have
c'est une
resolutions,
résolution
but that's
type
a
nouvelle.
typical, a
C'est-à-dire,
new
c'est une
resolution.
tweet.
Means that That's a tweet.
Accepté par l'Assemblée
Accepted
générale.
by
Parce
the
que c'est
General
une
Assembly.
manière d'envoyer
It
un
is a
message
way to send
extrêmement
a
rapide partout
very
dans
fast
le monde.
message
C'est
in
déjà
the world.
répété,
And it's been retweeted
par beaucoup de monde, mais
by many
on a
people.
pris ça pour vous montrer
So
ça et on va la
this
mettre
is
en
just
français,
a
on va la mettre en
screenshot to
espagnol
show
et
you.
tous les
We'll put it
centres vont
up
le
in
traduire
French
et l'envoyer un
and
peu partout,
English, Spanish. It'll be
dans
sent
le
by
monde.
all centers in all languages throughout the
Et
world.
puis, vous allez poser des questions, mais finalement, on a fait quelque chose de quand même
We did
essentiel, c'est-à-dire
something
on
that
m'a
was
donné ma
essential.
liberté.
I was
Et
set free,
après 6 ans, et je suis
saying,
ravi,
and I'm
c'était très émouvant
thrilled.
de
It was
pouvoir
really
servir
moving
Penn
to be
pendant
able
6
to
ans.
serve at
Et
Penn
ce qui est
for
beaucoup
6
plus
years.
important, c'est qu'on a eu une élection avec 3 candidats, 3 femmes,
What is more
3
important,
femmes
we had an
remarquables,
election with 3 women, 3 candidates,
de
remarkable
Turquie,
women,
Zeynep
one from
Orhal, de Serbie,
Turkey, Zeynep
Vida
Orhal,
Mijanovic,
Serbia,
2 personnes très
Mijanovic,
connues
and
à
2
l'intérieur
very
de
well
Penn
known
qui ont beaucoup servi avec
persons
beaucoup de
in Penn
courage, et une
with a
troisième
lot
femme
of
qui a
courage,
aussi
and a
beaucoup
third one
servi
who
avec
has
beaucoup de
served a
courage,
lot with a lot of
Jennifer
courage.
Clement, qui est à côté de
Jennifer
moi,
Clement,
qui est
she's beside
notre
me,
nouvelle
and she is
présidente.
the
Et
new
je passe la
president. I
parole
will give
à
her the
Jennifer.
microphone. Jennifer.
Merci. Yo vengo de México, fui presidenta del
I'm
Centro Mexicano
from
en un
Mexico.
momento
I
terrible.
was
Llevamos 10
president
años
of
en donde ya
the
han muerto
Mexican
80
Center in a very
periodistas.
difficult period.
Trabajé
80
muy
journalists
cercanamente con John sobre este tema.
were killed in Mexico
Entonces,
during
creo
that
que va a
period.
ser
I
una
worked with
transición muy
John on that
agradable
issue. I think
y,
that will be a tradition now, a very
con
pleasant
la
tradition
esperanza de
to
seguir
work on that
colaborando.
issue, and I hope
A mí
that
me
we
interesa
will
mucho
continue to
cuestiones de
collaborate
género.
together.
Parte de mi
I'm
trabajo ha sido
interested by
escribir
the
sobre
gender
tráfico de
issues.
niñas
I
en
worked
México.
on
Yo llevo 20
young
años en
women's
Penn
trafficking in
como
Mexico.
miembro y
I've been
siempre me ha
working
llamado mucho la
for
atención
20 years
que
in
en
Penn.
acta
I was
constitutiva
always
no hay
interested by
ninguna
the fact
mención
that
de
in
género.
the Constitution
Entonces, para mí sería muy
we're
importante
not talking about
colocar
gender. I think it would
la
be
idea de
important,
censura
as far as
de
I'm
género,
concerned, to
que
see
no es
that
solamente
this
mujeres,
is shown somewhere in our Constitution. We have to
presidencia
work also
y
on gender. During
luego
my
hay otras
presidency,
cosas,
I
muchas
will
cosas que hacer
talk
también.
about it on many
Recuperar
other
ciertos
topics
centros,
as
creo que
well,
es muy importante,
to
centros como
recover
Israel,
some
centros como
centers like
Pakistán,
Israel,
como el
Pakistan,
español, que hay que
the
concentrar en
Spanish
ciertos lugares
Penn,
donde no hay
Spanish
centros.
Center. So we have to
Muchas gracias.
mainly focus on these places where
Maybe
there
I
are no
should just say a
active
couple of
centers.
words in English, and you can say a couple of words in English, and Emile, since it's being followed, if you don't mind waiting for a sec. Just to quickly say that this has been an enormous success, that we're very, very grateful to Emile Martel and Penn Quebec for the work that we've done. And also, I must say, for the wonderful support of Penn Canada, which has stepped forward whenever Penn Quebec asked them to. And it has been a big Congress, 84 centers, hundreds of writers, people from, I think, 74 countries, the majority women, including our next president, Jennifer Clement. We've done a number of really important things. One of them was to present our annual report on freedom of expression in the country in which we hold the Assembly, which Canada, therefore an analysis of freedom of expression in Canada. Nowhere are we suggesting that freedom of expression in Canada has disappeared or that it's become one of the worst countries in the world. However, we always judge countries by their own standards and by international standards. And by both international standards and its own standards, Canada has moved from being at the very top of the pile in terms of freedom of expression. It has moved down quite seriously. A number of things have happened which are outlined in our report, and we didn't cover all of the elements, I must say. There are more, which indicate that there are serious problems. A serious direction has been taken in Canada to limit freedom of expression through a whole series of mechanisms, and the international organization cannot help but point this out. It is our duty. It doesn't matter when it falls. That's Canada's problem. It happens now at the time of our assembly. It's a report done for our members, and I can tell you we don't hold things secret. When it goes to our members, it goes to the public, and the public just have to deal with the reality of what the situation is. and then they decide what to do about that. We don't decide. We've brought in 2 new wonderful centers from Mali and Mauritania, part of our growth in Africa, where we have an enormous amount of programming and education supported by large organizations such as SIDA, the Swedish International Development Agency. We've launched the PEN International Writers Circle, which brings together some of the world's most important writers to support PEN both financially and morally, including Karl-Ove Knausgaard, Margaret Atwood, Jan Martel, Colm Toibin, and many, many others. We've also done something which is we started in April intervening on the refugee question. And some people said, why are you doing this? Because it's the same reason that we intervened in the 1930s on questions of what justice and dignity and democracy look like. What does civilization look like? What does language look like around refugees and around suffering? And so we have put out a very important resolution where we make a number of requests, of demands, and very specific forms of action on the refugee crisis, and in which we ask all countries to take very precise actions and much more action than they're taking now. And that, of course, includes a specific, although it's not named, a specific expectation from the point of view of what Europe is not yet doing. But it also means that since we're here in Canada, we cannot help but say, is Canada carrying its weight? Is the United States carrying its weight? And are all countries carrying its weight? You don't have to be a big, rich country to take 500 refugees.
John, I'd like to add something.
Yes, and our treasurer, Jarkko Tondi, would like to add something.
Thank you, John. So what I would like to just add is that what we are actually demanding from the states, nations of Earth, is nothing more than just they obey the international law. International law is pretty clear on this. Refugees must be helped. It's not an option that governments can, take or leave. They have to, and that's what we are usually demanding from the states. I mean, obey your own laws.
Thank you. And so finally, just to say that, as many people already know, I'm freed from being president after 6 years and can go back to just being a member of PEN and working the way 30,000 other writers do. But I have 2 things to do. One is to pass the mic to the president of PEN Quebec to say a few words on the declaration on translation, which is the Quebec Declaration, which was an initiative of PEN Quebec, which is one of the most important things to come out of this Congress because it's one of the foundation documents. We have a charter which is from 1927, written by John Galsworthy and amplified since then, an ethical and moral charter which guides every act we take, and we've been adding to it a series of documents on other obligations of PEN, whether it has to do with copyright, whether it has to do with the internet, whether it has to do with linguistic protection, the Girona Manifesto. And now here we've added the Quebec Declaration, and I'd like to ask our host, Quebec PEN, its president, Emile Martel, to say a few words.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say that the Quebec Declaration is certainly the text that we hope will stay as being a reference for a very large part of the professions of writing, one of which is the translation, of course, but also a testimony to a society which has been treating well its translators, rather well, and has depended very much on translators to transmit its message to the rest of the world. But I wanted also to stress the fact that this Congress was held because it coincided with a few things. It coincided with the end of the mandate of John Ralston Saul as international president, and he's a member of our center, so the least we could do would be to try to host him in his own city. And another thing is that we were lucky enough or we worked enough to make the Congress coincide with the festival Québec en toutes lettres and with the opening of the Maison de la Littérature. Those two institutions were partners from the start. Alors, je tiens à souligner, pour moi, c'est essentiel.
I must underline that it is the end of John's term, a superb term, and also the end of Québec en toutes lettres and the House of Literature, with which we have a great cooperation and partnership. And I think there is a tradition in place that a Congress of PEN needs to show its presence in the location where it is hosted, for a presence, for a mark, so that a window is open for so that we project ideas, principles, and this society should take a closer look on who are these writers, who are they motivated by, not only writing, but also a greater sense of justice. I would like to add something on the document that was prepared on the freedom of speech in Canada. It happened just the same yesterday in Kyrgyzstan. As members of PEN Quebec, we, of course, are taking a closer look on freedom of speech around the world, but we should not turn a blind eye on what is happening on our soil, because these things may be bothersome, but it can become even more threatening. So I think this report is extremely important, not only because it seeks the truth on the situation in Canada, but also it serves as a warning signal as writers and to witness what is happening right now.
Now I'd pass the mic to our new president, Jennifer Clement.
I'd just like to say that PEN is also obviously a literary organization. We believe in the power of literature. And it's very special to be the new president and from Mexico in Quebec, because thanks to Emile, Mexico and Quebec have had an extraordinary relationship for at least 30 years, which is a bridge, an extraordinary bridge between our two countries, both in acts of human rights, which has obviously increased in the last 10 years, but also mainly through poetry. And so it's very special to be here. Thank you.
Hori-san, do you want to say anything? No?
Talking about poetry, I'm sorry, there was a very large tradition of books of poetry from Quebec that have been translated into Spanish with Mexican publishers, and a very large number of Mexican poets have been translated to French and published by Les Écrits des Forges, for example. So there is that perception within the literary circles in Mexico that there is such a thing as a Quebec poetry. There might be all kinds of places fairly close that don't believe it exists, but you ask the Mexicans, they know, they do. Thank you.
So so we'll open it to if you have any questions, but just to say that the chair of our Writers in Prison Committee, Marion Botsford-Fraser, is here, can answer any questions, and also Tazleen Tarar, who's the executive director of Canadian PEN, is here with Neil Basundath, and also Grace Westcott, who's a member of our legal committee, because we have something quite new and really, really valuable, which is an informal committee of all the writers, many of them presidents of their PEN centers, who are also lawyers. And many of the problems we face when it comes to freedom of expression are actually legal problems. So this group, which is only, 3 years old? Yarko chairs, 2 years old, has already helped us put together our positions on LGBT issues, copyright issues. It goes back to the old tradition that many well-known writers are either doctors or lawyers.
Yeah, we are experts on poetic justice. I mean, being a poet and lawyer myself.
And Grace has been very, very instrumental. I think did the LGBT document was very helpful. So I don't know if you have any questions.
One question, where will the Congress being held next year? We are
thinking
about it right now. There's negotiations right now. Should have been Puerto Rico, but as you know, there's severe financial problems in Puerto Rico right now. So
c'est très intéressant. Ça vous montre comment on
it shows you
fonctionne.
how
On est arrivé ici
are the inner workings.
parce qu'on
We
n'avait pas de
arrived
congrès.
here
Normalement, ça prend
pessimistic,
2 ans.
disappointed, because we had no Congress
Carlos
next year,
et
and
moi,
Carlos and I
ça, et on a dit aux gens,
announced
est-ce
this.
qu'il y a des
I said,
centres qui
is there
peuvent
any
aider?
centers who could
Dans 24 heures, 7
lend a helping
centres
hand?
ont dit
And
qu'ils
in
voulaient
a
faire
few
le congrès
hours,
l'année prochaine. C'est un travail
7
jour et
centers
nuit.
have come
Et
forth
faire ça dans
and come
12
forward
mois. Alors,
with this.
on est en train de voir lesquels. Ça veut dire qu'on peut avoir 7
Overnight,
lieux pour les 7 années à
we
venir.
came up with 7
Donc,
possible
on va,
locations
dans
for the
2
7
mois,
next
on va
years.
savoir
So in the
exactement où ça va.
upcoming months,
Mais
we
aussi, ça ouvre la
will
possibilité.
answer this question. Also, it opens the door that we reinvent how we are holding a Congress.
Oui. Et ça marche pas.
Non, oui. Vous avez parlé de 28
You talked about 28 resolutions, I think.
Vous avez parlé d'une résolution.
You talked about
qui concerne
one
les réfugiés.
regarding
J'imagine
refugees.
que c'est une résolution.
Oui,
I guess
oui,
this
et
is
on
a
peut vous donner,
resolution.
des copies,
Yes, we
Oui,
can
est-ce
give you
qu'on-
copies
est-ce
for
qu'il y
it.
a moyen de savoir un peu quelles sont les priorités
Yes, what are
pour,
the priorities
la prochaine année ou les
for
prochaines
the
années,
upcoming year or years?
Alors, peut-être ce que je vais faire, c'est que peut-être Marion peut vous donner 2, 3.
What I will do,
You could give 2 or 3, highlights of resolutions which we think are particularly important. I mean, they're all important, but we've already talked about the European resolution. But perhaps, Marion, you could just pick out 2 or 3.
Yes, thank you. And let me say initially that the reason we chose
Vous voulez que je traduise? Ça va?
Okay. The reason that we chose these 3 empty chairs for this Congress is because we feel that these are 3 issues that should be dealt with by Canadian governments. Raif Badawi, his family is a citizen, or his family now lives in Quebec City. Eritrea should be of great interest to Canadians because we have enormous mining interests in that country. And also the issue of impunity in Latin America is something that our government should be addressing. In terms of our other resolutions, some of the key ones would be, for example, on specific countries where there have been recent very severe freedom of expression problems. So in Bangladesh, for example, there have been the killing of numerous bloggers, and suddenly that is a whole new category of people who are at risk. We have several resolutions on
Marion, actually, just to add to what you're saying as you're going along. So the Bangladesh one is really interesting because I was there, about a year ago, and saw everybody, and then the murders started happening, and Swedish PEN intervened immediately after the first killing, and with Swedish PEN and PEN International, we've got out about, what is it, Marion, about 5?
I think it's 5. I'm not
5
sure
bloggers
the
to
final
Sweden,
number,
but of course there's a lineup of, how many would you say? I mean,
84 listed.
Yes.
84 bloggers who are in danger in Bangladesh. Thank you, Tasleen. PENCAN's been very involved in this as well. And so we're looking around, not on the one hand, where can we find homes for 84 people? And hopefully we could bring some into this country. But also, what can we do about changing the situation in that country? We have an increasingly strong Bangladeshi PEN center. So it's working at all levels of trying to get international institutions, the local government, other governments to take in refugees. Marion.
So we've had specific resolutions on many countries where we have severe problems, including countries like Ethiopia, Turkey, Vietnam. We've had thematic resolutions on subjects such as closing of civic space by governments, which is an issue in which we draw attention to how governments are curtailing the activities of civil liberties organizations. That's happening in countries around the world. We have resolutions on the very important issue of criminal defamation, which has become a way that governments use legislation in order to inhibit freedom of expression. Anti-LGBTQI, you mentioned. We've also had a resolution on mass surveillance. So it's a combination of specific country problems and also broader thematic issues.
And Marion, I assume that the resolutions are available.
When they are finalized, they will be made available on the PEN International website. Some of them are having to be rewritten as we speak, but they will become available. I believe what happens is after Congress, a communication will come from PEN International, which includes reference to all of the resolutions. Carlos can speak to that.
After Congress, we are taking each resolution. Resolutions are addressed to governments, to international bodies. So we send the resolutions to the relevant persons in the governments or international organizations, and we publish them in our web, and we send them to all our centers as tools for campaigning.
Yeah, but what I would suggest today is that if you are interested, that you sit down with Marion perhaps immediately after this, and if there are some that particularly interest you, we could help with drafts so that they can write about, for example, the European resolution, rather the refugee resolution, which I think is particularly relevant in Canada. You might find it very interesting because the demands are not going to change, right?
Correct, yeah.
You know, I think so. Why don't you, after this, just sit in the corner with Marion for a bit and work out what you'd like to see. Is that okay? Ça va comme ça? Okay. Other questions? Yes, in Spanish, I imagine. En español?
One in Spanish, one in English.
Okay.
For you, John, does it have a special meaning, the fact that the new president is coming from a country that PEN International and you personally has been so involved denouncing the situation there?
Well, when I was elected, I said one of the things I would do was to really, we had a long history in Latin America, but in some ways it had become a quieter area for PEN, while it was becoming a more and more dangerous area for freedom of expression, and of course has always been explosive from the point of view of literature. And so immediately after I became president, with Emil's help, I must say, and many people in PEN, we started working on how to intervene in a different way in Latin America. And the first country we intervened in, and of course in order to intervene, really you have to intervene with the writers of the country. So the first person I started working with was Jennifer. In fact, it's very, a strange irony, a wonderful strange irony, that really the first person I turned to and we turned to was Jennifer. And with PEN Mexico and the other Mexican PEN centers, we've had 3 delegations to Mexico in 4 years. And intervened at all the high levels. We've got them to change laws. We've dragged, with Jennifer and now the new president, Aline Davidoff, we dragged freedom of expression into the center of the national debate, whereas organized crime and the government had managed to shove it to the side, saying freedom of expression can wait until we've finished with the war between the government and the organized crime. We said, wait a minute, this is not a war between government and freedom and organized crime, because how could you tell the difference, given the levels of corruption and impunity? And secondly, you solve problems like this through freedom of expression. And the journalists have to be able to stay alive. So for me, it's incredibly actually moving that I think you're the 32nd president, I believe, is not only a woman, but is from Mexico. It's very, very important to me.
Emil?
Uno de los factores que a mí me ha encantado en este congreso es que ha habido más centros de lengua española de que nunca los había visto. Hace 15 años que yo voy a esos congresos, que la representación de Latinoamérica era grande, que eran 8 centros más los...
What's great is that we had a great representation from the Spanish centers, some from the Latin American centers. Representation was great, because that's what I liked at this conference. And here we can highlight the value of PEN's trilingual form of organization. And what I wanted also to mention that was also very important is that it was a congress in French, in English, and then in Spanish. And that's what we achieved. It is an international organization with French as translated into English and Spanish. Logically, we had to underline also the presence of Spanish through several centers. Some centers had a first presence, like Chile and Argentina and Bolivia, first time in a long time. Also, 8 of them were from IT or in Latin America, and it was very satisfying to see them.
Gioconda Belli, one of the great poets of the Spanish language, and Luisa Valenzuela, who is a mythical figure from Argentina, and these are the presidents of their 2 centers, just to give 2 examples. I don't know if you want to... Sorry.
Yeah. Tenía una pregunta para ti, Jennifer.
Jennifer, I have a question. The fact that you are now the president of PEN International from Mexico, and you come from Mexico, do you think this situation might change in Mexico? Do you think the Mexican situation will, and the government will feel pressure rather to free certain prisoners? I hope that, yes, there will be a change. In the last 6 years, I've been working on this issue. And as John mentioned, we have previously changed a legislation. Before we could kill a journalist, there was a state crime, but the situation was very complex in that regard. It was the same forces that led to violence, and these same strains were doing the inquiry on this crime. So it was quite absurd to see how this was conducted. We haven't yet seen the impacts of that change, but we must press along, and we have a lot to do. The fact is that Mexico cannot solve all these problems without the help of the United States. The consumption of drugs, the purchases for weapons, all these come very much from the United States. A recent report mentioned that if weapons did not end up in Mexico, 47% of the people who sell weapons would not be able to make any profit. That being said, it's a terrible combination between these 2 countries, Mexico and USA, right now.
Oui? No? Oui, oui. Oui, bien sûr. On est là pour vous.
Yes, we're there for you. All right, you mentioned that this is quite a success. 84 centers, 73 countries. The fact that Quebec City is a very nice city. Why does this explain the fact that it's a priority right now? Is it a catharsis right now, an important mobilization, a moment of mobilization? Yes, I think so. I think it is a. I think it is. You know.
On a 95 ans. Il y a des hauts et des bas.
In 95 years, there are highs and lows, and I would say that in the last 12 years, we are in a uptrend, and we are expanding. And we've seen that there are parts of the world where we were too weak, not present enough. And you see, look in Afghanistan, in Burma, in etc. It is quite an important expansion. Our role in Africa in education with CEDA is quite an experimental program that is doing wonders right now with high schools. All of this is giving us a lot of energy. For example, we have programs in Central Asia, based in Bishkek, where we held a congress last year. It was quite a challenge, by the way. We have what we call the School of Freedom of Speech, a summer school for mostly young university students. These people come from 4 from total dictatorships for 4 countries. And we spend weeks with professors, writers, to understand what this is. What is freedom of expression? So we reinvent all the time. And these inventions, we come up with things that come from the centers, and if it works, we work with them, or they tell us. And this summer school will probably also take place in Latin America. In Canada, we call it asymmetrical federalism. That is PEN. That is kind of PEN's structure. It's very comfortable here because we never really know where in the world these ideas will pop up. So we had this special emphasis, especially here today, to raise funds, to find funds to get people from all over the world, and they were quite excited also to come here, Quebec, Canada, and see how it would work out.
Carlos voulait dire quelque chose. Notre directeur exécutif, Carlos Turner.
Our directive, executive director, rather. It's like to see that this Congress is a movement on Africa. The fact that we welcome new centers in Mali and Mauritania shows that in French Africa there is a renewed interest, a new movement from intellectuals, novelists, writers to participate in an international organization. And I think this is part of a movement where we are expanding in the French Africa in the upcoming years. We are right now expanding the PEN network in Africa, also in a very specific sense, and I think it's very interesting in Canada, in the term of multilingualism. These centers have French writers, in the case of Mali and Damashek, and different also languages in the country, and Mali also, but we have Sanya, we have Soninke, Pearl, different languages in that country. And it's a very interesting trend in Africa, and it draws them closer to PEN. We see that link between with these writers for native publishing in the native languages of these books in Africa. Also, this shows that in Africa, the late Latin America network is carrying momentum rather, and I want to mention also that in this it's a dynamic that's in the whole Americas. Now we can talk about the American network in PEN, and there needs to be solidarity between the North America and Latin America centers. It's a vital part of this network. We've always seen the links between the Quebec and Mexican center. The Quebec center has also supported the Honduras center with a very active presence to study on the report on the crimes on journalists and to support the creation of a center in Honduras and appear before the Latin American Human Rights Court. So there are a meshing of some sort of a relationship between American centers.
So it's often like partnerships, and so this PEN Canada, PEN Honduras, a report was done on the situation there, which then led to a mission, which led to a prize being created by PEN Canada for courage in journalism in Honduras, which also included, just before that going, as Carlos has said before, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And we very often do this. It's often triangular. There's between two centers and PEN International. And PEN Quebec played an absolutely central role after the terrible earthquake, well, before the earthquake, in the creation of the Haitian Center with our friend Georges Anglade, who was a good friend of all of ours. And then in rebuilding the center afterwards, PEN Quebec was the link, was the partner with PEN Haiti, and still is a key link. So all over the world, it's PEN Norway and PEN Afghanistan, and PEN Germany and PEN Ghana. These sort of friendships across lines, which are part of which we've developed, which is part of the new vitality of PEN, is that it's very surprising one of the reasons we have these congresses, it would make them so different is, the vast majority of our members either have great difficulty leaving where they live for political and financial reasons. And you get them together once a year, and you just simply don't know what's going to happen. And something happens. I
can say that the very first thing I did as president of Mexico PEN was to give all our money to Haiti. Because the earthquake occurred exactly at that moment. We didn't have very much. We had, something like $2,000. It all went to Haiti. So there are very special things that do occur and surprising things. Thank you.
No? Okay. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Merci. Gracias. So Reverend, can you perhaps? I think in particular they might find it interesting to look a bit at the European. I keep saying the European, that shows you